Banking quotes. Compiled by the Xaviard.com team. Here are some quotes on banking. A bank is a place that will lend you money if you can prove that you don't need it. Bob Hope. Banking technology has made it simple and efficient to invest in good causes. Banking gives you a glimpse into what makes companies succeed and what makes companies fail. Consumer banking, selling the debt to middle-class families, has been a gold mine. Banking was conceived in iniquity and born in sin. I can't imagine trying to operate a company banking on the fact that my logo is cooler than somebody else's logo. No country can truly develop if half its population is left behind. Justin Greening. Banking is necessary, banks are not. Bill Gates quotes. I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity, under the name of funding, is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson. Every day is a bank account, and time is our currency. No one is rich, no one is poor, we've got 24 hours each. Christopher Rice. It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Henry Ford. He tried to read an elementary economics text, it bored him past endurance, it was like listening to somebody interminably recounting a long and stupid dream. He could not force himself to understand how banks functioned and so forth, because all the operations of capitalism were as meaningless to him as the rites of a primitive religion, as barbaric, as elaborate, and as unnecessary. In a human sacrifice to deity there might be at least a mistaken and terrible beauty, in the rites of the money changers, where greed, laziness, and envy were assumed to move all men's acts, even the terrible became banal. Ursula K. Le Guin. Rather than justice for all, we are evolving into a system of justice for those who can afford it. We have banks that are not only too big to fail, but too big to be held accountable. Joseph E. Stiglitz. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. Thomas Jefferson. When the river of emotions bursts its banks and expectations go over the edges of reality, the brain creates hallucinations. Anxiety-stricken people feel elusive vibrating alerts and hear phantom phone rings, since absence of ringing generates scaring emptiness and destroys their self-esteem. Kein Schwein ruft Miken, Eric Pevenaghi. Gringotts was the safest place in the world for something you wanted to hide, except perhaps Hogwarts. J.K. Rowling. The drug war is a total scam. Prescription drugs kill 300k a year, while marijuana kills no one, but they spend billions/year fighting it, because potheads make for good little slaves to put into private prisons, owned by the banks who launder the drug money, and it's all documented. Alex E. Jones. When they took a young man into Tellson's London house, they hid him somewhere till he was old. They kept him in a dark place, like a cheese, until he had the full Tellson flavor and blew mold upon him. Then only was he permitted to be seen, spectacularly poring over large books, and casting his breeches and gaiters into the general weight of the establishment. Charles Dickens. The rich run a global system that allows them to accumulate capital and pay the lowest possible price for labor. The freedom that results applies only to them. The many simply have to work harder, in conditions that grow ever more insecure, to enrich the few. Democratic politics, which purports to enrich the many, is actually in the pocket of those bankers, media barons and other moguls who run and own everything. Charles Moore. The acquisition by dishonest means and cunning, said Levin, feeling that he was incapable of clearly defining the borderline between honesty and dishonesty. Like the profits made by banks, he went on. This is evil, I mean, the acquisition of enormous fortunes without work, as it used to be with the spirit monopolists. Only the form has changed. La ROI est morte, vive la ROI. Hardly were the monopolies abolished before railways and banks appeared, just another way of making money without work. Leo Tolstoy. He became convinced that ordinary commercial financing could be done for a service charge plus an insurance fee amounting to much less than the current rates of interest charged by banks, whose rates were based on supply and demand, treating money as a commodity rather than as a sovereign state's means of exchange. Robert A. Heinlein. Drive-in banks were established so most of the cars today could see their real owners. E. Joseph Korsman. My bank must stop trying to sell me identity theft protection. You know why I expect you to protect my money? Because you're a bank, Bill Maher. Everything predicted by the enemies of banks, in the beginning, is now coming to pass. We are to be ruined now by the deluge of bank paper. It is cruel that such revolutions in private fortunes should be at the mercy of avaricious adventurers, who, instead of employing their capital, if any they have, in manufactures, commerce, and other useful pursuits, make it an instrument to burden all the interchanges of property with their swindling profits, profits which are the price of no useful industry of theirs. Thomas Jefferson. The banking institutions, my friends, are sailing under false colors. They are running with the hare and hunting with the hounds. And we should never forget it. Carl Wiggins. Banks are nothing but old-fashioned money lenders. They encourage you to borrow, to get in debt, and when you can't pay back the loan they take your home away. At least a money lender only breaks your legs. Carl Wiggins. Myth: US housing market is in recovery. Fact: big banks have been hiding their bloated home inventory, seized by virtue of home foreclosures. Z.K. Abdel-Nour. Banks do not create money for the public good. They are businesses owned by private shareholders. Their purpose is to make a profit. John Rogers. You could carve out the inside of a brick and hide your money in it for safekeeping. It's certainly safer than keeping it in the bank. Nicole Mackay. Banks are to the economy what the heart is to the human body. They cycle necessary capital through the whole, and they are barely noticed until pressure, necessity, or crises. Hendrith Smith. We're sorry. It's not us. It's the monster. The bank isn't a man. The bank isn't like a man. Yes, but the bank is only made of men. John Steinbeck. If we were not impressed by job titles, suits, and jargon, we would demand that financial advisors show us their personal bank statements before they tell us what we could or should do with our own money. Mokakoma Mokanawana. I do have a sneaking admiration for anyone who has the intelligence to plan a job properly and the courage to carry it out. As long as no one gets hurt and the target is a bank or an insurance company. Carl Wiggins. Advances in digital banking will not eliminate the branch. They will allow for more creative ways to help clients achieve financial well-being. Hendrith Smith. People aren't pissed just to be pissed. They're mad because a tiny group of crooks on Wall Street built themselves beach houses in the Hamptons through a crude fraud scheme that decimated their retirement funds, caused property values in their neighborhoods to collapse and caused over 4 million people to be put in foreclosure. Matt Taibbi. If we behaved like banks we would be charged with fraud. Jacques Fresco. The best that money can't buy, beyond politics, poverty, and war. His mind filled with visions of a decadent kleptocracy in rapid decline, abetted by both political parties. America's masses, fed on processed poison bought with a food stamp swipe card. Low-skill workers, structurally unable to ever contribute again and too dumb to know their old jobs weren't coming back. The banks in Gotham leeching the last drops of wealth out of the country. Corporations unrestrained by any notion of national interest. The system of property law in shambles. The world drowning in debt. George Packer. There are people in Europe that struggled during an entire life to save as much as possible in banks that bankrupted and left them homeless. Robin Sacredfire. Giving the banks free interest loans is like the government subsidizing the banks. That's crazy. Kenneth Eade. By loaning banks money for no interest, you're really letting them into the casinos with the house's money, aren't you? Kenneth Eade. The problem with keeping money in a bank is that in the blink of a tiger's eye it will turn on you. What's yours becomes theirs, what was your sweat and labor and sold off portions of a lifetime becomes a stranger's. Paolo Bacigalupi. By the usual reckoning, the worst books make the best films. Ian M. Banks. Eric Daniels, the boss at Lloyd's TSB for example, was paid less than Goggin in 2007 despite delivering 3.5 times Bank of Ireland's profits that year. Goggin's total package was 50% more than that of Andy Hornby of Hobos, who collected €2.6 million in 2007. The Scottish giant made €6.988 billion that year compared to Bank of Ireland's €1.584 billion. Shane Ross. And the banks? Hard to believe in a time when we're facing a banking crisis that many of the banks created, are still the most powerful lobby on Capitol Hill. And they frankly own the place. Richard Joseph Durbin. A bank is but honesty with a premium. At least this is what it is supposed to be. Lamine Pearlhart. In the past people used to rob banks, now the banks rob the people. David Alejandro Fernhead. Don't trust banks, trust math. Santosh Kalwar. When you gain, they, banks, gain. When you lose, they're indifferent. Anas Hamshari. Banks depend on you to survive, you are a smart and beneficial victim of that. Ehsan Sigal. Google takes your privacy, governments take your rights, banks take your money, corporations take your jobs, Bitcoin and other blockchain-powered solutions gives it all back. Olawale Daniel. In the same way that central banking nearly wrecked the world and created one calamity after another, Bitcoin can save the world one transaction at a time. It is time for a new beginning. Jeffrey Tucker. The bank wanted me to sell those customers that debt, because the system needs you to buy that new car, that holiday to Barbados, that latest iPhone or that new extension you've always been dreaming of. The banks are happy to let you do it with their high-interest credit products, and they want me to be the guy that sells the idea to you. I was serving the machine that was enslaving me. Kay Hill. Harold, she would say, do you think I'm a fool? If I place the crimson diamond in any safe deposit vault in New York, somebody will steal it, sooner or later. Then she would nibble a sprig of catnip and peer cunningly at me. Robert W. Chambers. I don't have a bank account, because I don't know my mother's maiden name. Paula Poundstone. A banker is a fellow who lends his umbrella when the sun is shining and wants it back the minute it begins to rain. Mark Twain. There is two things that can disrupt business in this country. One is war, and the other is a meeting of the Federal Reserve Bank. Will Rogers. Bank failures are caused by depositors who don't deposit enough money to cover losses due to mismanagement. Den Quayle. For more quotes like this kindly visit Xaviart.com. Thank you.